Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Kingdom of Dreams podcast, The Making of Stories. I'm your host, Jawad Nir. Today, my guest is Adam Price, who is a composer of a series that launches today, The Crow Girl, on Paramount Plus. And he's worked on a bunch of different projects as additional music composer. He's been part of orchestra for projects like Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning, Life on Planet, who have had directors and DPs from that series on this show, on the podcast, and many, many others. We talked about the series, we talked about life, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Adam Price. Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Wow, a lot of books. That's a cool little frame you've got around you of
Yeah,
glowing
it's
books.
a collection over the last. Actually, it started about, I would say, 25 years ago,
Oh, wow.
and then it kind of stopped, and then it kind of restarted again a few years ago. So,
I
but
love
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Books,
How have you
books are one of
been?
those things you can't throw away. There's a lot of things I try and throw away. I try and be quite minimal, but books is just one of those things that grows. But yeah, no, I'm really good. Thank you. Yeah, it's really good to chat. And yeah, whereabouts are you in the world?
Toronto, and yourself?
Oh, nice. So Southeast London.
Amazing.
A very grey Southeast London, to be honest.
Well, London is always raining. I mean, but having
Hey
said that,
now.
having said that, the last few times I've been there, it's been quite good. And I think Toronto is now like in winter. I mean, it's one thing to have snow, which is fine by me personally, but just the gloomy weather,
Sure,
it gets a little too much sometimes. But that's just how things are.
sure.
You can hear me fine, right?
Yeah, crystal clear. Can you hear me?
Amazing. Yeah, no, thanks for reaching out, Adam. I'm not sure if we reached out or you reached out, but regardless.
I
Um,
think you reached out ages ago, actually, like bef sort of maybe even a year ago now, actually. So it's
oh, okay, okay,
finally
okay,
good to say hi.
okay. Yeah, no, it's good that you reached out again because about the Crow Girl, which comes out today, I think, on Paramount
Mhm.
Plus.
Yeah,
Uh, didn't know anything about it. As soon as you sent out the email, I looked up the trailer, which I found quite interesting, something different.
great.
And then I listened to the tracks that you sent, and then I went to your website, and after I listened to the tracks, I went to your website and I saw your work, and the tracks were incredible because they had this eerie feel, they had this soothing feel, they had this techno music feel, and a combination of, and then when I after I listened to it, then I saw your work, having to work on and please correct me the exact credits, but I know you did additional music for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, correct?
Yeah, yeah, correct.
Um, and then there were a couple other big titles which are just escaping me right now. Please fill me in.
Black Adam, Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, the majority of sort of the big name ones are with composer Lorne Balfe, who I'm sure
Yeah,
you're aware of. So yeah,
100%.
the big juicy ones with the wonderful looking posters are normally associated with him. So yeah, he's
Yep. Which is good because I know Lorne Balfe. I've been listening to him since he did the 13th. I was it 13 hours from Michael
yeah,
Bay.
yeah. Is that like
Yeah,
how many years ago is that now? They all blend into one, but um,
yeah. It's been about 10 years, but he was
yeah,
working with Hans Zimmer as more or less your capacity that you are now, and plus doing a lot of orchestra work and your own music now. So it's a great path that you're on. And speaking of that, tell me your journey. How did this all start? You wanted to be a composer.
um, yeah, good question. Yeah, I wasn't from a musical family per se. Yeah, music, like 99% of us, is obviously a big part of our life. I can remember listening to sort of dad having music on 24/7, sort of 80s music mainly. Phil Collins, Genesis, that vibe. Um, and then yeah, none of my family are musical, but I kind of hit the jackpot with my parents, who are amazing, and they just kind of chucked us in, me and my brothers, into everything. And one of those things was music, basically. So piano lessons, trumpet lessons. Um, and yeah, unlike my brothers, music kind of just stuck with me, which is kind of a blessing and a curse, really. But yeah, it just kind of worked. I didn't really realize at the time, but it just felt very yeah, at home, really. Whereas other things, some things stick, some things don't. Swimming didn't stick, but piano lessons and music did. So yeah, I just loved it really. And it became kind of day-to-day life. P Performed a lot. I then later went to Cardiff University in Wales, when sort of music was going to be that. Yeah, that was the plan. In what sense? I didn't know this was before sort of writing music for film and TV was a thing. Um, Went to Cardiff, which was amazing. So sort of did the academic side of it, which has been great to have as a toolbox kind of thing. Obviously, it's not essential in the world we're in as composers, but yeah, that was hugely helpful. And it had a big contemporary classical scene in Cardiff. Um, so that was really cool. Contemporary classical composition. Um, so really helped me think differently about music and sort of open my eyes, basically. Um, and yeah, one thing led to another. And yeah, the one thing with sort of contemporary composition, it was a lot about the process, how you thought about music, as opposed to kind of the end product. Which, I mean, from my family, for example, whenever they heard any of my contemporary classical stuff, they were like, "This sounds awful." It just wasn't as accessible as I probably would have liked. And film music obviously is a complete opposite to that in the sense of the end product is essentially all that matters, as opposed to your process. So yeah, long story short, started writing music for different. I sort of at Cardiff, people got in touch from different departments at the university. Started to understand what this world was. Although there's no rule book, which I wish there was. It would have made life much easier. I mean, it's the same with your any discipline really that we're in. There's no rules or things to do, and 1 + 1 = 2. That's not always the case in our world. But I knew this was kind of thing I wanted to do. I managed to get into the National Film and Television School here, um, and this all happened very quickly. Like I was quite young for the NFTS, so it wasn't kind of the plan. Had to find a way to afford it, all the practical things that go on that you've got to think of. Um, Sort of make a living while sort of trying to improve because obviously this is a long, long game. Um, and then yeah, went to the NFTS, which was great to meet all the other disciplines. I get an understanding of film, and film making. It has been like just crucial, really. Um, and then yeah, it snowballed essentially. I started assisting people, and that the number of people I've assisted grew and grew, um, while carrying on doing my own stuff. And then before you know it, you've got this kind of ripple effect thing, and then you're in this wonderful mess of an industry that we're in at the moment. And now I'm here talking to you. So that's the A to Z of it at the moment.
No, that's good. It's interesting. You said one point, and I'm going to kind of pivot from music and film to more to just life in general. You talked about rules, right? Like I think what sometimes happens, and I'm sure it has happened to you, and it's happening to it will continue to happen to you. It happens with me. Is that you're trying to follow this rule, right? Like you want to be XYZ, and you have to go through this path or that path. But sometimes organically you don't end up going through the traditional path, but then mostly when the main rule that you're following of a trajectory that you're trying to go for is not working, then you're forced to figure out something else, right? And that's where the breaking of the rules kind of come into play. Has that ever happened to you in life, not just necessarily in career, but combination of both or one? And if so, do you recall anything specific about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's happened to all of us. We have this kind of rough idea of where we're going, and then things pop up that mean you can't. I suppose the first one for me was, I mean, I had to get to London to assist my first person I assisted. I didn't expect to go to London anytime soon. I was making all this up, and then yeah, that popped up, so I needed to make it work and go to London. Yeah, but I think that's it. In retrospect, if I like look back and think of all the little things that happened that have led me to where I am today, I mean, it's like all of us. We you can't predict it. But I'm also a big believer in like making your own luck to an extent, like put yourself in opportunities. So even if the original opportunity that you thought might manifest it won't, that hasn't happened, but then because of that, something else happened, you know. I can think of many things that I won't bore you with.
Yeah.
But,
No, no, no. It's interesting. Have you ever seen that movie Sliding Doors?
no, I haven't.
Check it out. It's
Hide
from
indoors.
the yeah, they made a similar series on Apple, but nothing to do with that. But the concept was it stars Gwyneth Paltrow, and the whole film is about there's a scene where she's going down the subway steps, and the doors open of the subway or the tube, and she walks in, and then it cuts to her going down the steps, and the doors open and she's trying to get in and she doesn't get in, the door closes. And then from there the film splits into two different stories of what happens after the fact that she caught the subway, where did life take her? And the fact that she didn't catch the subway, where did life take her? And I think that's what's so fascinating about, like, there's all these potential realities that could be, but because of one little action, they could even be me moving this book
Yeah,
can
yeah.
start a chain reaction of something that, will happen 30 years later or 20 years
Do,
later.
do you believe in like the fate element of it? I know it sounds really corny, but
No, it doesn't sound corny. I believe in it. I believe in
yeah.
fate. And but I also think that you can't just sit, I mean, which is obvious, but some people will probably say, you can't just sit on your bum and expect the fate to happen. You have to work your butt off. You have to work hard and make it happen and take it that in that direction. And it won't go exactly the way you want it to go, but as long as you have that goal and set, and that's what your destination you believe it is, then I think it will. And you make your own fate, but it's already there at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, this is really meta. This is super deep, but yeah, it's difficult to put your finger on because you could sit there and do nothing, and then by doing that, anyway, who knows? But equally, I enjoy the process of getting stuck in and like trying to make things happen. Like that's the more fun way of doing things as opposed to see what happens.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. Going back to the Crow Girl, how did this come onto your lap? Was it through somebody you knew, a referral? Just run me through that.
Yeah, so well, talking of sliding doors moments, so I think Lorne working with Lorne has been a sliding doors moment for me. So this leads on to Crow Girl, but yeah, I assisted tons of people, and each one kind of led to the other person, and yeah, I can very literally see that correlation, the lines between all the people I've helped out. Um, and then Lorne was one of those people. During the start of COVID, I lost two gigs basically, and I was in London, which is not the cheapest place to live. So I put out a social media video, not really with the intention of working with Lorne, to be honest, but it was more like I was almost angry with life. And he was really he's very generous in the sense of he releases a lot of his scores online, which are quite interesting to see. Um, so then I did this really cheesy, uh, it was his dark materials theme, but on like household objects. Um, just because I fancied it. It was literally I lost the gig that day, and I just thought, sod this, I'm bored. I've got my rig up, blah blah blah. I've literally got nothing to do. Did that. That was fun. Didn't think much of it. Yeah, because social media is obviously quite an important part of our day-to-day life, really.
Yeah,
Um, but then, yeah, Lorne literally messaged probably like 2 weeks after and said, "Do you orchestrate?" And obviously the answer is yes, regardless of if you can or you can't. But luckily,
yeah,
well, I thought I could, and I can, but it's that thing of what you don't know. You think you know, but now then when you get more knowledge, you realize how little you knew, and then you're like, how little do I know now? Which is a bit daunting. But anyway, enough of the big conversations. Um, so yeah, then I
no,
decided,
it's all good. Please continue however you want to continue.
no, no, and then yeah, started orchestrating for Lorne, doing some additional bits and pieces, additional music, and that kind of grew. And yeah, Lorne's been super generous with his. I mean, I've learned a lot from Lorne just by as a byproduct of helping him out. So yeah, and then this was probably 5 years, 4 years ago. Um, and then yeah, recently Crow Girl came up on his radar, and he messaged me and basically kind of said, "I think this might be your cup of tea." Um, so I was like, "Okay, sounds good." Looked into it. I think there was the first line I read of like the Crow Girl when I like Googled it, was something like, "What's the what's the worst thing a human can do, or something along those lines, like how bad does a human have to be before he becomes a monster or something. Um, and I was like, I'm not sure why Lorne thinks this is my cup of tea, but hey, I'll take it. And then yeah, it was a book. I knew it was a book, so I thought I'd read the book. It was quite a chunky book, 800 pages long, but yeah, read the book and yeah, dark, gritty, horrible, with I mean, a definite sense of heart and determination running through it, but like it was dark, and I was like, how the hell is this going to translate to the small screen? Like it was super dark. There's some things I wouldn't even repeat from the book, but gripping. Like it's still a massive crime fiction vibe, whodunit vibe. Um, so then yeah, I said yes to Lorne, and Lorne acted as score producer on it, um, and yeah, one thing led to another, and I yeah started
That's
working on it,
awesome.
and it's been yeah absolutely brilliant. A great team, directed by Charles Martin and Rebecca Rycroft, and yeah, the whole Buccaneer team have been amazing. I mean, yeah, I kind of got it sounds really cheesy now, right? But we've all got the kind of a how did you get into film music kind of thing. And for my household, it wasn't really films; it was like TV dramas, like British TV dramas.
Yeah. Right, right.
So like every Friday or Sunday night at 9 p.m. there'll be a TV drama just there. And I loved it. Like the immediacy of it. Yeah, they were just great. But Marcella was probably one of the first things I remember seeing and being like, I could hear the music, which in hindsight, I mean, Marcella music is mixed really quite strong at the forefront, super dry, tactile sound. So it's no surprise really that I like acknowledged it. Um, but yeah, obviously had no idea who Lorne Balfe was, who actually wrote the music for Marcella. Had no idea who Buccaneer was, Charles Martin, any of those people until 8, 9 years later. Um, and just by chance, Buccaneer worked with Charles Martin again. So that was a kind of a satisfying little tick box for me, really. And then yeah, it's been a really really great project, and it's really good. Genuinely, it's yeah, I would have loved to have watched it 9 years ago. Unfortunately, the magic is ruined ever so slightly by knowing how the sausage has been made. But yeah, it's an absolute winner.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to checking it out. And I'm gonna while you were talking about that part of meeting Lauren and how it went this way and it could have gone that way, the sliding door. I recall the conversation I have, and I am horrible in pronouncing his last name. He's worked with Lauren and Hans quite a bit, and I had him on the podcast. Andrew, he did the score for Gran Turismo.
Yes, I'm
Andrew,
not gonna butcher his exact last name
but
either.
you know who
But
I'm talking about,
yeah,
right?
I know him as Andrew. Yes, I've
Yes.
orchestrated
So
on a project
his
before.
his his story was very briefly was, which was again that sliding doors moment, is that if my memory serves me right, that he had he was into music, and he was going to go into some school, or he was going to go do some job where it was going to be paid job, like doing music in LA. And somebody from his school came up and said, there's an internship, which is obviously free. You get to work with this music composer named Hans Zimmer. And he went to his parents, and I don't think his parents knew who Hans Zimmer was either, neither did he. And his parents said, go with the internship. And that completely changed the trajectory. I mean, imagine if he had taken the paid job, yeah, would have paid the bills for a few months or a year.
Well,
But
I mean, Andrew's amazing, so I'm sure he would have been a roundabout way, ended up in a
I'm
similar place.
sure, but
But yeah,
still, it's just one of those things that it made it faster, let's put it that way. Right.
sure.
And he
Yeah,
he
yeah,
could have just been at the same, like the fate thing. It could have been there the other way, but it's just that moment of decision, like which one do you take, right? So
yeah.
interesting.
Very interesting. No,
How,
Andrew.
how did you meet how did you meet Lauren?
So it was through that social media video that I did.
Okay.
But we had kind of mutual. So I did a documentary with Alex Harwood, who's friends with Lorne, and we kind of had mutual links. But he wouldn't have known, like he wouldn't have known who I was. I obviously knew who he was at that time. Um, but yeah, he just again sliding doors moment. He was looking for an orchestrator, and I just
Got it.
so happened to be present, and yeah, the rest is kind of history, as they say, with that
I
little
I must
story.
I must have missed that when you mentioned it earlier, but no, that's great to know. And you know, who are some of your favorite composers besides Lorne and Hans Zimmer?
I mean, look, I don't listen to film music a ton. I mean, I do listen to film music. Obviously, as most of us are, your John Powell's and your John Williams's. I could listen to those all day, um, and the projects they're working with. But do you know, I'm a big fan of like super tactile, upfront, tangible like mixes. Um, I don't know if that's because it's kind of the opposite of big
Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
classical things that I've kind of been used to. On the classical front, Mahler's, Stravinsky tick my box. But then I went through a stage of actually really liking like Levy and Johnny Greenwood, that kind of stuff.
Mm,
I mean, you probably got a handful of scores yourself, music scores that kind of don't leave the head. But Jackie for me, for Levy, for some reason I just
mm,
can't. There was just something about it. The mix, how it works with the visuals. Um, I knew they were written away from visuals completely, which is also how I work, just by chance as well. And I mean, it's not revolutionary. A lot of people do. Um, but yeah, Mick Levy, Johnny Greenwood. Um, but on a day to day, if I'm honest, the music I listen to is kind of like just 80s pop, essentially. To almost detach. I tend to listen to the exact opposite of what I'm working on, whether that's subconsciously or just, yeah, beneficial.
that's interesting because I find, and I think it's different for everybody, right? So, I know when I was in the post-production phase of two documentaries that I was directing, narrative feature documentaries simultaneously, and this was during COVID, like early COVID. And because COVID was so, had an impact on all of us, and the films that I was working on were extremely depressing and human rights violations and all that, following two
Excellent.
I started watching all this stuff like Fast and the Furious and like, just complete nothing wrong with it. They're entertainment, but just completely non-story driven, mindless, without any arcs or anything. And that had a direct impact on the post-production of the films that I was working on because I started going,
Really?
yeah, and I started going in that direction. And it didn't hit me until maybe a month later. I'm like, what am I doing?
Did you do it
And
deliberately? Like, were you watching those
no,
deliberately or just
no, no,
subconsciously?
no. It was just to kind of get out of the whole depressing thing, right? Like
Sure.
COVID plus films. But then I started watching Breaking Bad. And then that had a complete opposite effect and it
Oh,
worked.
wow.
So it's weird how those things work. It wasn't deliberate. It was just something that goes in your brain at a subconscious level and you just start outputting that in a very unknowing way.
So, are you aware of what you're watching and listening to now when you're on a project?
After that, now, yeah,
Yeah,
100%, 100%. I know how like I just be very, very careful, very
it's
careful.
ruined you for life. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, but yeah, so going back to Crow Girl, Adam, working with the team, the creators, the directors, what was that experience like? Was this something different than anything else you had ever done? If so, how? And working with them as well.
The one big thing was the fact it was a book. This was the first book that I read, even if others had been based on a book. I hadn't read them, probably because of time reasons. But this I had time to read the book, which sort of provided an extra opportunity to kind of sort of experiment musically before engaging with the visuals. Um, Even though they're different mediums and different, it's not a replica, they're not attached so literally in that sense. Um, but yeah, it just, I think it enabled like a lucky accident. I trying to do that anyway, which is why right away from picture to like hope something you do creates some kind of lucky accident that works, even though it shouldn't. Whereas as soon as you see that visuals and you've got that immediate reaction going forward, then that's it, your mindset. So this sort of gave that extra opportunity of let's see what happens. Um, so yeah, I mean, for example, the book is like a Scandi book, whereas the series is set in Bristol. So I remember sort of like loss of innocence was definitely a major theme in the book. These aren't any spoilers, I hope. No, they're not spoilers. It's very the first thing you see essentially. So we're experimenting like voices, and like frozen voice. that kind of sat really well. And I also did some like Scandi folk songy things, which then when seeing the series or the visuals or getting the color of the visuals itself, it's like I would have never have gone to that place had I saw the visuals first. Um, then, but there was elements of the voice, which obviously has that immediate visceral as an instrument. It's, the most direct, accessible thing we own as an instrument that we could all use. Um, and the voice was working, so that then became a huge part of the series, of the
Mm,
sound palette. And then that led us on, like the main theme is actually a nursery rhyme. So all these things kind of lead on to that. So that was the biggest difference, being able to use a book, and that has definitely shaped some of the happy accidents that happened in the sound world. But yeah, the directors and the Buccaneer team were like, they knew exactly what they wanted in the sense of color and vibe, and things we brought to the table. They were open to seeing how that worked. And it was just brilliant, to be honest. Really
super.
good experience.
No, that's really cool. While so every production, producers, directors, creators, depending on the nature of the production, is different. Were you involved in the music, building the world of music in your space before the production began, during the production, or was it kind of like, here's the final picture, figure it out?
No, definitely not final picture. And I mean, I prefer to work, and I know a lot of other composers work, get the music in there as soon as possible. Bring something to the table that is going to elevate the film, or the series, because you don't want temp going in there. Well, temp can be super useful,
Yeah,
but if you've got a world as distinctive as Crow Girl is, and it is super distinctive, um, what does that sound like? Let's get that music into the edit before the edit's even begun. So yeah, I was off writing suites after suites of music and just sending them over and seeing what stuck, seeing what didn't stick, seeing what Charles and Bex liked. Um, and then yeah, thankfully in the early edits, you start putting things together. And do you know what's also really good? There was a suite I did, which was the main suite in the end. But it had this like really thin strings on it. I recorded some solo cello and solo violin. And it was like, because a lot of the visuals that I saw, as in like stills, were like branches, and it was a lot of woodland, a lot of forest, a really spiky feel. Um,
yeah,
and then within this massive, huge, thick suite was these strings, like wispy things, throwaway gestures. And then Charles basically used that stem in the edit, put it into another character, and then all of a sudden this was, which I would never have done because it was this super dry, exposed. I mean, I might as well just have got naked, basically, because to me, it felt super like But he put it in there and it started to work. And yeah, those kind of things only happen if you're able to provide music rather than waiting to the end. No, of course,
yeah.
if it comes in at the end, there's other solutions to creating the best, most efficient, effective palette. But no, I really like working as early as possible and then
That's
chucking a load
awesome.
of stuff and seeing what happens.
Super sweet. I was reminded of this again, going back to a conversation I had with Mark Mancina, who has done Bad Boys, Speed, Twister.
Yeah.
Um, and he was telling me that how they had a temp track. I just want to be sure which movie came first. I think Speed came first. Just give me 1 second. Speed came out on June 10th, 1994, and Bad Boys came out 1995. Yes, so it was, I was right. So once, so when they were editing Bad Boys, the temp track they used was from a Speed.
Ah, I see.
But what ended up happening because of that, I don't know if you remember, if you don't, take a listen to it. The theme of Bad Boys and Speed is exactly the same, but the notes are reversed.
No, really?
So Speed is like dun 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 dun, right? And Bad Boy is like Da, 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 da. Like it just
Ooh,
it's very they just ended because of that temp track, the entire freaking vision of the soundtrack changed, at least according to Mark
interesting.
Mancina. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. I was reminded of that how those things happen just, very, very organically.
Yeah. And look, temp is, it's a blessing and a curse, and it's part of the world we live in. It's
Yep.
essential. And I know some composers that are just like anti-temp. I'm definitely not anti-temp at all. There's a huge practical element to it. Um, but I suppose avoid situations like that where, temp love is obviously a thing. So if you can avoid that, and more importantly, create something not necessarily different for the sake of, but just something as effective as it can be. Um, I think that's a better solution first than temp.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it is, but especially for people who are, I think even like, films and series that have budgets because you're just sometimes the music is not there because like that's if you're working with someone like Hans Zimmer or Lorne Balfe who have like slew of projects, right? So you have to sort of figure that out based on their schedule. But mostly for independent filmmakers, that's a blessing because you don't have that kind of thing to budget to work with in the beginning. But like you said, it's a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about one specific track? And it could be two different tracks, or it could be same, where you had the most fun making and the most difficult time making.
Uh, Most fun. I mean, look, I was so lucky to Slash, the guitarist, the Slash. He was an exec producer on this series, and I sort of had no expectation or that he would be involved in the music at all, just, as his exec producer. But he was super generous with his time and was super keen to contribute in any way he could. So there's a guitar line in it, and then for the main theme, basically. And yeah, he recorded that, which was obviously for me pretty awesome. And I mean, having his sort of raucous sound on it elevated the main track to next levels, basically. And also he did so there's this really good the first shot of the film is like a descent from the heavens to this really earthy farmland, essentially. Um, and the main theme is like an open fifth down, boom. And he played that, and we've slowed it down, pitched it down, uh, added the fifth onto the end of it. So all of a sudden you've got this huge, gritty, nasty glide, and it's the very first thing you see of the film. It kind of like a musical kind of like deep dive into how essentially before it goes off and does crime vibes. But
Mm.
yeah, having him involved in the sound was just super fun. Uh, yeah, so privileged to for have him on it. Um, and yeah, and you can definitely hear him on it. It's pretty unmistakable. Um, so yeah, in terms of difficult cue, another fun one. I recorded some birds in my garden. Charles wanted this idea of like Bristol R&B vibes, basically, and really uh, gritty sound. So yeah, Bristol Birdsong just happens to have some of my birds that visit me they're not my birds, they're everyone's, but they come and visit me every morning. Um, so yeah, they're in it. What was it? Was it difficult? Do you say difficult?
Yeah, challenging, difficult, or something that you had to struggle with overcoming and trying to figure out where do I take this or how do I do this? I mean, that happens on in every part of life, but just yeah, anything that sort of you felt was challenging to do.
Yeah. Well, look, the titles were a good challenge. So, long story short, we started to use because of the innocence element of this. And I'm a big fan of nursery rhymes anyway, and sort of the dark undertones of them, which for me felt really symbolic of this whole show. So many layers of like deception and darkness. That nursery rhymes kind of can do really well. And we landed on Hush Little Baby as a nursery rhyme. That just felt really apt. And yeah, we did like a twisted version of that. The vocalist Rotem, who's incredible, has this like really cool, dry, on the nose sound. That combined with different harmony and twisted that nursery rhyme as much as you can. Um, so we had like a 2.5 minute suite of this song basically. But then practically you have to fit it down into this wonderful title sequence. Um, so yeah, that was more of a practical technical challenge to try and capture the essence of the title track. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, glad we did because yeah, it became a huge sort of thread across the episodes. You'll hear it in its many contortions, angry, wonderful, nice. Yeah, it's all in there. But no, that was probably a big challenge.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Just sort of wrapping up here, a few things. What's next for you that you're able to share? Are you
Oh,
working on anything big,
yeah,
small?
yeah. So orchestration is kind of a big part of sort of half my work is composing, half is orchestration, which I love doing. Um, Purely because I can work with other composers and see what they're doing and watch
Of
from the
course.
outside in, and run the sessions and do all super fun things. Um, but yeah, so there's a big. Do you know what? I'm gonna just keep my mouth shut. But yeah, I'm
I
orchestrating
think I
a big
I
film
think
in Feb.
I think I know exactly what you were gonna say, and I'm not gonna say
Okay, let's not.
it.
Just in case.
But
The plans.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm really
Yeah,
looking
me
forward
too.
to it. Yeah. Um, and in terms of, I had this one little thing of a thought and question that just kind of blanked out here. What was I gonna ask you?
You're busy thinking about that film, aren't you now? You can't say.
No, 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 no. I'm not. I'm literally thinking about this thing. It was not about the career in music. It was something to do with life in general. Oh yeah, but actually it was about career. So is there been any, you talked about how you are working at you love doing orchestra work and you meet other musicians in, same realm, some composers. Has there been any time where you came across somebody that you really looked up to and you had that awe moment but difficult time, like you wanted to approach him or her and you had a difficult time doing so?
Uh, do you know, I look up uh, as you get into this world, and there
I
was
know
so
it's
many.
the same. Yeah.
It's yeah, it's you kind of look at. I mean, I can like people like Sarah Vaughan, for example, who's an incredible sort of TV drama writer. I was a huge fan of
Mm.
her. Um, Look, and then met her, and obviously we're good friends now. So it's kind of like a that's gone completely. The one person I do remember is at the first year of NFTS, they invite you to Dario Marinelli's house um, in London, and we have a chat with him. So Pride and Prejudice, Atonement, and I remember thinking like, oh my God, this is by far on paper sort of I'm gonna say the biggest, but high profile composer.
For you and for her profile, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and yeah, Dario Marinelli was. We sort of walked in, and he was yeah, he was amazing and put us at ease straight away. And he's like Oscar was just very casually sitting behind him. I remember thinking like, what the hell? But that was amazing because it kind of like immediately for me broke. Like I said, there's no rules or rule book, but seeing him just in his studio, which was kind of a fairly modest studio for the music that he was writing, which is obviously incredible. So that was cool. That it just broke down all kind of that wall that makes it feel inaccessible. Like it
Yeah.
felt accessible for the first time. Um, so yeah, that was, and seeing the picture that he was working on a tiny screen, it just, I'm not gonna say cheapened it, but it went behind the scenes to something I hadn't seen before. So it was like,
I get that.
I can do this. I
Yeah.
think I can't do it, but you pretend to be able to do it.
That's awesome, man. That's sweet. When is or is it already out, the soundtrack to Crow Girl?
So probably a week or so, perhaps.
Okay. So there's no
So yeah,
official date yet.
not yet. There's bits and pieces on my Instagram, but the official soundtrack will be out in probably a week, maybe 10 days. Yeah.
And what's your Instagram handle so people can check it out?
Uh, Underscore Adam.Price, which is do you know what? You've got a really good name. I envy people with really good names. My name is so boring. Sorry, mum and
No, no,
dad.
no.
But
No,
yes,
it's
underscore Adam.Price.
because you didn't get an Instagram handle, it's a boring name.
No, 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 no. I just mean, but do you know what I like? I like the look of names. It's a bit of a
Oh,
weird
okay.
thing, perhaps. So your name visually on paper is really good. I don't like how
I
mine.
appreciate that.
So I'm letting out all my secrets now. I'm not a complete weirdo, but these are just little things that, yeah, get me by.
I get it. I appreciate that. And The Crow Girl is out. The series is out today on
Yeah,
Paramount Plus. Listen, Adam, it's been awesome talking to you, man, about music, life,
likewise.
you know. Let's do this again. I would love to have
But
you on again, maybe of we can chat about something from the past, like Dead Reckoning or some other project that you want to talk about. And whenever that big project comes up, we can talk about that too.
yeah, sure. I mean, when you by London, are you in London anytime?
You know what? It's funny because I might be pending few things, maybe within the next month or two, pending few
Oh,
things.
brilliant.
If it
Well,
happens, I'll let
let's
you know.
keep in touch. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
absolutely. Absolutely. We'll get together.
Sounds good. Cheers. Well, it's great talking to you. And yeah, congrats on the podcast. You're smashing it.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. You too. Take care. Bye bye.
Have a good one. Bye bye.